looks like we got two or more, and the Bible says, where there are two or more gathered, he will be in our midst. So, looks like Dr. Hardin and Princess are both on. So, let's go ahead and get started. Tonight, we have another very special edition of Unpopular Opinions. Tonight, we are going to discuss this big topic that's been going on for the last several weeks about defunding the police. What does that mean? This will be more of an educational forum and a lot less of, the opinions. You know how we are here. Please keep it respectful in the comment section. Please make sure that you have given everyone the space to express themselves without offense. And tonight, again, we're going to discuss what it means to defund the police. Why is it such a hot topic? Why we have so many people on opposite sides of the fence that are really, really emotional about this. But we're also going to dispel some rumors, and we're going to make sure that everybody leaves here with a better understanding as to what that means. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and add Dr. Hardin. Karen Hardin is the Maricopa County Branch President of the NAACP. Start with this discussion as soon as she jumps on. Happy to have her and Princess Lucas, who is the third Vice President of the Maricopa County Branch NAACP, to be here. And a little bit later, we will be discussing with an officer as a response to our discussion tonight. And there she is, Dr. Hardin.
Hi.
How are you?
Yeah. Oh, pretty good. How are you? Nice to chat again today.
Absolutely. Yeah. So worked just like a charm. This time you got in very quick and no.
Yeah. So they say third time's a charm. So the third time we do this, it'll be just really super easy, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. And there will be a third time because we had promised that we're going to come back and we're going to discuss the importance of voting and educate people on what's on the ballot, the down measures, and all of that good stuff. So
great.
We will be talking again very soon.
Okay. Good. Okay.
So, funding the police. Take it away. Tell us why we're here.
Okay. Well, I hope we have quite a few comments because I hope this is really more of a discussion and people sharing their opinions. And I was just thinking, Reggie, maybe to begin our dialogue, which I hope it's a dialogue. Like I said, I hope people put comments in the comment section and we can share opinions. And maybe one thing that we could do is what started this was like 8 minutes and 46 seconds. That's kind of what brought all of this to a head. So I think it might be appropriate if we started with a silent pause, like a meditation or a prayer for 8 seconds. Now, those 8 seconds will represent 8 minutes and 46 seconds. But we're just going to pause for 8 seconds and pray for peace throughout the world for 8 seconds. And if everybody will just join me for 8 seconds.
Sure.
In silence, okay?
Sure.
And then we'll just say, peace be unto everyone, so.
Yes.
And most everyone understands that 8 minutes and 46 seconds that I was referring to was the amount of time that George Floyd was held down by the police officer, and that some people call over-policing. That prompted nationwide protest commentary about police proceedings and things like that. So I think what we would just ask people that if they would share their feelings in the comment section about this ideal of defund the police. Because one position or my thoughts on it is that when we say defund the police, that creates a lot of emotion.
Yes.
But I do believe in most cases what it's referring to is uh, one, repositioning dollars. It doesn't, in most cases, it does not really mean people want to do away with police officers. Um, it more so means that, is there a way that municipalities can look at their police force and look at things such as maybe moving more money into training, as opposed to, I've heard the term of, let's demilitarize the police departments
Okay.
from the standpoint that, do police departments need to put money in the massive tanks and guns, high-powered guns that they have, or demilitarize them? Um, where where are the funding allocated? Um, and one thought is, they talk about maybe funding should go more into, like I said, helping officers learn how to give them more training on de-escalating situations. Um, my personal suggestion would be, maybe there are money put aside where police officers may be required to take cultural sensitivity courses to understand the different behaviors and nuances of people from all walks of life. Um, Maybe some of that money could be shifted into um, hiring more mental health professionals that could go along with police. And one thing that I thought about is, I don't know if anybody else, where this might be, if it's been spoken about before, but worldwide, we all know, like 911. You call 911 when you need the police. What if worldwide we had another number, 711? If you thought it was, if you as a um, family member or whoever is in a situation with a person who you know has mental health issues, then you call a different number rather than 911. But there's an international number that's used for people suffering mental health situations. Um, and I think I was reading an article that was talking about Camden, New Jersey.
Mm-hmm.
And in that area, it sort of speaks to, after several years, they were able to change their police culture there. But they also point out that it sort of wasn't an overnight transformation, but it was also a combination of a combination of, like, citizen involvement and things of that nature. Um, and I know we've had some uh, different opinions of how the City of Phoenix police budget is dispersed here. And uh, with us tonight is our third vice president for the branch, Princess Lucas Wilson, and she is also a college professor, teaches social work courses, and her major contribution to the organization is working with the different police departments. And I would ask her to maybe speak about local policing, like in Phoenix, um, because also she's been instrumental in following policing, a safe policing for our branch. And I know in the last couple of years, Phoenix has been in the news as being the city with the most shootings, highest number of shootings, and I think around 200 and she will hopefully correct me if I'm misspeaking, but around 200 shootings, and I'm trying to remember if that 200 number means how many were fatal shootings. Um, and just recently, we had a budget. The city of Phoenix passed its budget for the police, and I believe they're getting an increase, millions of dollars of increases.
That is correct.
You know,
Yeah.
so the question is, how is that allocated? And another question I'd like to see other people's opinions about is, do you think we need police officers in our public schools? So if people would respond to that, that would be great. And maybe, if you don't mind, we'll switch over to Professor Wilson and see if she has some comments that she'd like to share,
Yes.
that might create some dialogue.
Sure thing. A couple of
Okay.
caveats to what you were just saying, though. In other cities, major metropolitan cities, they have already begun to cancel the contracts for the city police department to provide security for their school district at the educational levels of secondary,
Mm-hmm.
post-secondary,
Mm-hmm.
um, collegiate, and a couple of even large elementary school
Mm-hmm.
districts, unified
Mm-hmm.
elementary school districts,
Mm-hmm.
have canceled contracts. One of them, the first one, obviously, was in Minnesota. They
Mm-hmm.
canceled at the college level, and then the school district for the city followed right
Mm-hmm.
behind them and canceled. And now they're looking into more of a guidance counselor and maybe like a private security.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the questions that we have before we switch over is, how do we manage that when we have a public servant in the protect and not the serve part? Um,
Yeah.
you
Mm-hmm.
know, to define defund versus abolish. And if that's something I need to kick over to Princess, I will. But I think
Mm-hmm.
that's where the biggest confusion that turns into um, an argument. That's where the contention comes from because many people don't have the ability to define the difference between abolish and defund. Like you said earlier, to demilitarize doesn't necessarily mean to take all guns away, but
Mm-hmm.
how often are police departments using the tanks? Like here in Arizona, there is an army style tank sitting right in front of
Mm-hmm.
the sheriff's office,
Yeah.
and
Right.
I think it's for decoration because I don't think it's ever been used, at least not to my
Mm-hmm.
knowledge. But they do have other situations, SWAT, when they have sniper situations where they can de-escalate from afar. And I guess, how do we establish um, a conversation that will educate people between the difference between defunding and abolishing? Because we don't want to have a conversation where we're talking about absolutely getting rid of the police,
Mm-hmm.
but maybe using them more effectively.
Mm-hmm. And this would be great. Professor Wilson, maybe if you will put the right clinical words to the behavior, because my opinion, Reggie, is that people who get upset with the word defund the police, I want to say it's more like, it is more as a scapegoat or a cop out, right? I believe that educated people really understand that defund the police does not mean get rid of police.
Mm-hmm.
They use that just as a way to um, hmm, folks who want to create animosity will use that sort of like as an excuse that they will. But common sense people understand that that's just a buzzword, and that it really does not mean getting away, doing away with police officers.
That's good.
Because me now, on a personal level, I'm not speaking for the NAACP ideology, but on a personal level, I'm okay with funding the police as long as we put the money in the right line items,
Yes.
meaning give them lots of money because I want to be safe,
There.
but give them lots of money because I want to be safe, but also make sure that that we have a higher quality of individual who's going into that profession who really protects and serves, who's been trained to de-escalate,
Mm-hmm.
who's been trained to be compassionate, who does not react quickly. And Professor Wilson and I both go to different police community meetings and have gone through some of the simulation training that the police officers have to go through. And yes, sometimes they have to make these horrific split-second decisions.
Yes.
Okay, but maybe if we have a higher trained individual that goes into the force, make some minimum educational qualifications so that they have the training that they need, so they're equipped to deal with the emotional stress that job brings.
Yes.
And then I'll turn it over to Professor Wilson because this is her specialty on our branch, is working with the police. So
Absolutely.
yeah.
It's
So
good to talk to
okay.
you. If there is an opportunity to jump back in before the conversation,
I'm here until the duration. So
please
if
stick around.
if we switch back and forth, that's good.
Good,
Yeah.
good, good.
Okay.
Good to talk to you.
Okay.
Thank you.
All righty. Okay. Okay.
That was Dr. Hardin, Dr. Karen Hardin. She's a Maricopa County branch president for NAACP. We're going to jump over to Princess. She is the third vice president for the same branch chapter. But before we do that, real quick, just want to again reiterate that this conversation is an important conversation because we need to be educated on what the difference is between certain scenarios, so that we're not placing a lot of our emotion into something that's not factual, one, and two, that we're not arguing the wrong argument points. Look at it like this. The U.S. government has a multi-trillion-dollar budget that they pass every year. We entrust our Congress and our politicians into balancing our budget and to take all of our tax dollars and pour them into certain things, social services, the military, and everything of the like at the federal level, and then we do that at the state level as well. So this conversation tonight is really more looking at like that. We have over $600 billion budget that is dedicated to the military. And if you go and you take a very, very hard look at our military budget, whether you are pro-military or you are middle of the road or you are think that we have too much invested in our military, you can understand that our military budget, which is a huge, huge chunk of our overall federal budget, if you break that down into a smaller pie chart, then you will see line items like pension. You will see line items like compensation for all of our military personnel, from the corporal level to all of the sergeants to those who are operating in Washington. They are still military. They are still, all the high dollar paid people are still military, and they're still getting compensated very handsomely, down to our equipment. When they are R&D testing the different bombs and rockets and planes and stuff like that, those are typically outsourced into contracts for third-party companies to come and help us build our tanks and our planes and stuff like that. And you have to ask yourself, every time a plane crashes, that is your tax dollars at work. Or every time that we go out and an unauthorized strike of another country, we are using equipment that we paid for that we now have to replenish. And it's the same conversation. We're just looking at our police budget, and we're basically doing an audit to see how efficient it is. And that is really the conversation of defunding the police. It is not getting rid of, it's not abolishing, it's not diminishing. It is more of taking a harder stance in terms of looking line by line at the budget that the police have across the nation from our tax dollars, and seeing if it's used most efficiently, and if not, how can we use it more efficiently. So having said that, we're going to jump into get some input from Princess, who is the third vice president of the Maricopa County branch NAACP chapter, and she specializes in this specific field in criminal justice and things. So as soon as she accepts the request, we'll see what she has to say about this matter. Love the conversation that's going on right now about the schools and whether or not police presence is necessary, especially with us having school shootings at a very alarming rate. Obviously, we're not having them now because the kids aren't in school, but that will be a topic of discussion when we finally regather in schools. So while we're waiting for Princess to join and get the request, um, please continue with the comments and continue discussing respectfully your opinions about how can we manage a potentially diminished police presence in certain things. Um, Looks like she can't get in. I'll try it again. I'll send another request. But yes, those are very relevant questions. What do we do when we need police
Am
presence?
I in?
Yep, I see you.
Yes. Am I in?
Yep, how are
Okay.
you? Can
I'm
you?
good. How are you?
Not too bad, not too bad. It's been a long time.
Oh, yeah, it has. It has. It has. So thank you for bringing us.
Uh-oh.
Um, I have been hearing some of the comments made, and I have a few ways to look at defunding the police in some different types of ways. And this is a very complex issue. Criminal justice and law enforcement is very complex. And we know that change doesn't take place overnight. So when we think of defunding the police, um, I'd like us to think about reimagining public safety, because that's really what it's about. Just having a different lens, looking at what public safety is, as opposed to our traditional way of operating. And we know some of the problems associated with that. So it has to do really with reinvestment in resources. And I'm a social worker by profession. So with the different social justice issues, it's all related to criminal justice. Everything is intersected. So when we look at reinvestment, that's looking at the funding for police. And we know that the police are charged with dealing with all types of problems that they're not trained to deal with, that they don't go into their profession to deal with. And so, for example, if we just look at mental health, affordable housing, jobs with living wages, and just looking at alternatives to public safety concerns, such as community policing, and the lack of resources in these areas and others also puts an undue burden on police officers. So we know that all officers are not bad, and you know that we have had ongoing problems with over policing, fatal shootings, etc. And that's real. So
Mm-hmm.
we need to acknowledge that that does happen, and that's real. So that's the first step to resolving any issue. So I think Reggie had mentioned something about the dollars that go into policing.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things to consider when you look at budgets related to state allocations and allocations from localities, it depends on the community that you're looking at. And one really high percentage in terms of expenditures to police departments budget-wise. In 2017, local government spent 86% of its budget on various modalities of public safety, including police. And one recent commentator estimated that one community allocated 50% of its budget to policing.
Mm.
And so it's understandable how under-resourced, underserved communities, you know, may recognize this discrepancy and want more equality in terms of distribution of resources. And if you look at any of these issues, if they were adequately funded, would make the communities better. It would relieve police officers
Yeah.
from having to deal with things that they're not qualified to deal with and that they don't want to deal with. So again, it's reimagining. So why do we spend so much money in certain areas when we look at policing? And there's some who believe it's because some communities, the people are viewed as enemies by police officers. And as I said at the beginning, we know there's good police officers, but you do have some that have that type of view of certain communities. And they see themselves as going in and taking control of these people, just have a kind of a warrior mentality rather than a guardian mentality. And how you see a community definitely impacts the way you interact with people, how you view people. Just in my field, briefly in social services, we had a situation where there was a disproportionate number of African American children dying in foster care. And so a committee was put together to kind of see why that was happening. We reviewed 100% of the cases, and it had to do with the perceptions of communities. Some people felt that certain communities were unsafe, they wouldn't visit, they didn't monitor their children properly. So perceptions are a real big part of how we conduct ourselves, not only personally, but in our professional lives. And when we look at communities, we know that there's a difference in how communities are policed depending on the ethnic makeup. There's, you can point to several examples of young men, for example, getting stopped maybe on some minor infraction. And if it's in a community with a high population of people of color, that young man would get arrested. And,
Yep.
we've read about these negative outcomes, and I won't repeat all those because the outliers really stand out. So we know people have gotten unjust sentences, they've been shot, just over things that really didn't require a lethal response.
Yes.
So some believe that communities with high social justice needs, or your basic things you need to live, that, like I said, police officers see themselves as going in as warriors. And you mentioned, Reggie, the military equipment. And if we just look at Portland right now, what's happening, where the current administration has sent in federal officers from Homeland Security to immigration. It's just like a hodgepodge of different type of officers sent to a state, which has never happened before. Usually if federal intervention is a part of a response to anything, the federal government works with the state. So in Portland is threatened, and also Chicago, there's these camouflage officers picking people up off the street and putting them in unmarked vehicles and driving away with them, sometimes detaining them for 5-6 hours. So that's an example of seeing yourself as a warrior or a certain perception of how policing should be done. And by and large, the protests have been peaceful. And one thing that gives me hope, there's a lot of things that give me hope, but in Portland, you have the Wall of Moms. And I don't know if you all are aware of the Wall of Moms. They became so concerned about what was going on in their community. And some of the women have never protested before.
Right.
But they were so concerned about kind of potential violence, because what's going on is with the presence of those federal officers is aggravating the situation, and you do have violence occurring. So this wall of moms decided that they would use themselves as a barrier between the protesters and the police officers to de-escalate that violence. That's how concerned people are in the community. So that's one recent example in how things have escalated in terms of a federal response.
Yes.
So if we just, again, go back to reimagining public safety, just imagine adequate resources for mental health concerns. And we know that there's been some fatal outcomes or over excessive force used when people are having mental issues. There was a recent case in Tucson where the person was restrained to the point where he couldn't breathe. Like the typical, I can't breathe, and it was fatal for him, and he was having a psychotic break. So if you reimagine some of the funding for police being put toward mental health concerns, and that can be in conjunction with the police department. And there are some efforts related to this mental health support team model. And I know Phoenix PD has done it some. It took a while because there's no funding for it.
Yes.
And if some of the funding was just redirected toward having more of those teams, or having adequate humane services for people who do have mental health issues. If we just take affordable housing again, reimagining, if some funding was put toward affordable housing. Police officers are often called to deal with concerns related to homelessness. And when we think about some of these areas, police officers are trained to deal with crimes, homelessness. Some of these other things are not crimes. Jobs with living wages, that presents a whole lot of problems. And one that is major when in some communities where the jobs are gone, or people have been incarcerated and they get out of prison where they can't find jobs. They may have children. They may feel compelled to sell drugs. And that presents a huge problem. And like I said, there's discrepancies on sentencing and arrests related to selling drugs. But that's another area that we need more funding. Some of the funding in terms of a living wage, is on companies. It may require some additional legislation. It may require some funding that would help get the legislation, in the public eye. Just a variety of ways to deal with that. And reimagining policing and public safety also includes considering different approaches to accountability. And so we know that there's been a lot of concerns about accountability, especially recently. There's always been concerns, but now we have cell phones. We have different ways to track information. So one way to do that is have an independent civilian review board. And I think that's occurring in some communities. And the independent part is the key to where these are citizens that investigate complaints and complaints made by those in the community. And this would increase the confidence in communities regarding the police force. Reevaluating the provisions of qualified immunity. And that particular provision has resulted in police officers not having any consequences for using deadly force unnecessary. So when we look at qualified immunity, it grants police officers immunity from civil lawsuits unless the plaintiff clearly shows the officer violated established statutory or constitutional rights of which a reasonable person would have to have known. And you can see how vague that is.
Mm-hmm.
And the key is the civil suits. So when you see the lawsuits and where there's money paid out to families for unlawful excessive force and the like, that's taxpayers' money going to pay those lawsuits. Yes. And officers cannot be sued at all.
Mm-hmm.
So in my profession, you can be sued for malpractice. You can be sued for causing people harm personally. So anyway, I'm not an attorney, but this is a provision that a lot of people have viewed as being very unfair. And is part of the Justice and Policing Act that the Congressional Black Caucus put together in terms of addressing that issue. So where do we go from here? We need to keep the dialogue going. And these conversations can be hard, and they can also trigger, you know, if you've had family members that have been you had some negative experiences, or you have yourself, you know, it can be triggering emotionally. It can trigger officers. I know in helping professions, sometimes you're not always seen as people don't jump up and down and say, oh, they're here to help me, you know. And so, you know, for officers with good intentions that are trying to protect the communities, when they hear some of this criticism, it could be triggering for them emotionally in a variety of ways when you're trying your best to do a good job. So that's recognized. Also, what we can do is recognize the multicultural response that we've seen recently and the global response. And we know that with the civil rights movement, there was action taken. One of the main reasons is because we were viewed globally as being an unjust society, and with having a global response recently to some of the current issues, that's a big plus. So we need to build on that support, and we need allies, and that's been recognized. So that's a great thing. And most of all, we need to all work together, even if we disagree on these concerns, because they're complicated. They have a historic basis. You know, there's different theories about why they exist. You know, social control being a big part of it, and why are certain people treated a certain way by police officers. You know, we see things in the media, 14-year-old girl thrown to the ground in a bathing suit, and an adult male police officer put in his knee in her back. And so, you know, it begs the question, would he want his daughter treated that way, just for some little disturbance at a pool, or just witnessing George Floyd and what happened to him? There's many, many other examples. So we need to, you know, acknowledge that those things happen and try to continue to work on figuring out a way to make the lives of everyone better, to make everyone safer, but realize there are some real discrepancies in how people are treated related to race and other factors. So that's what I have for you.
That's good. That's good. And so the discussion continues, and the discussion, it gets really hairy when you start to get into the conversation of picking and choosing. Some people call it the Monday morning quarterbacking, where you look at a situation that has been lethal or close to being lethal, knowing the facts later, and asking yourself, did it have to go down like that? I've even had a discussion just this week with someone, and the discussion was a very productive one because even within our own community, and when I say our own community, I mean the Black community, we can, what others would describe as distribute violence as a consequence for wrongdoing, and then we turn around and uh, we criticize others for what could be deemed as very similar behavior. Now, obviously, when I say similar, I don't mean to the point where there's permanent harm done or there's fatal force, but we grow up in a community where people that are entrusted to raise us have permission to beat us with certain objects when we don't fall in line with what we believe are the rules of upbringing. And then when you have a policing force who does something that could be deemed as very similar, there's an outcry. These are the discussions that are being had across all the communities. So thank you so much for your information. Did you want to respond
Yeah,
to that, by the way?
I, yes, I did. We have to be careful that we don't kind of blame the victim. I know there's a lot of people that believe in corporal punishment. I don't. But sometimes if we're not careful, we can internalize certain uh, thoughts about violence and other things, and it can distract from the main issue, being, uh, you know, anxious when you leave your home and you're driving because you might be killed by a police officer. And with the corporal punishment and beatings and all that, there are those who think that that came from slavery.
Mm-hmm.
And the other part of it is if you were raised in the South in Jim Crow or before, and you were a male, if you didn't have extreme self-control, I mean extreme, where you could take being devalued, disrespected, etc., daily, you would be killed, lynched, shot, whatever. So
Yes.
there were those parents who thought that rather than have the police kill you or you be lynched, I'm gonna discipline you in a way where you have extreme self-control. And that kind of self-control, depending on your personality and your makeup, some people can do it and be okay. Other people, it's internalized rage. It comes out on each other because
Mm-hmm.
we are the safer targets. So you have violence in African American communities, some of them ongoing, because of all the issues I just named, the de-investment in communities, the loss of jobs, you got COVID, you got all this stuff going on, and people explode. And the safest targets sometimes are our families and our communities. So I'm just saying that to say that deserves compassion. And what we really don't want to get into in terms of maybe looking at communities where we're no longer a part of, and you see things on the media, is classism and seeing those people that are in those communities as being violent, irresponsible for no reason. They just wake up one day, start shooting folks and beating them up. That's not how people are.
Yeah, absolutely.
We're
Absolutely.
good people. People are born, I believe in the goodness of humanity. And life can cause you to have certain responses. So
Oh,
we need to
absolutely.
be very careful as African Americans not to let that distract. And like I said, I don't believe in corporal punishment. I know, there's jokes about it and whatnot in our culture, and we all laugh or whatever.
Yeah.
But
But it is a real thing, and it's a real conversation. And depending on
mhm,
what side of the conversation that you're on, like you just said, it doesn't negate that the conversation is being had, which again is the platform that we're using. Just because people are on different sides doesn't mean you can't keep talking about it. And even if we never come to the exact same script on the same page, it doesn't mean that these conversations don't need to still be had. I
Oh, yeah,
will
they need
I
to
will
continue.
restrain my own personal belief on the comparison for the parenting and as you call it, corporal punishment, and comparing that to what some would deem as police brutality. But I will say this from a personal standpoint, and I completely agree with you. Um, when it comes to accountability, there's enough accountability to go all the way around. And I'm not going to say, eye for eye or dollar for dollar, but for every instance that you see a police abusing their power, you also see an actual criminal. Now, there was a discussion in the comments from
Sometimes,
yes, from a
sometimes.
few weeks ago, and this is where I'll break it down to the molecular level. There was a discussion in the comments a few weeks ago from this IG Live conversation where someone came out and they began to criminalize George Floyd specifically, saying that he had some things in his background. And let me say this, and this is just myself talking, and I can do that because it's my IG Live.
Mm-hmm.
I don't believe
Mm-hmm.
in capital punishment. So therefore, I don't care what your crime is, it's never punishable by death. So I don't care if the
Mm-hmm.
man
Like
was a
killing it.
crackhead. I don't care if he had committed a crime right in front of the cop. To me personally, it does not justify skipping the judiciary system that we have put in place here for him
Mm-hmm.
to have his basically his due process, and let a
Right.
jury decide, let a judge decide with all the facts in front of them, just decide not only if he's guilty of committing whatever crime that he was accused of, but also let them decide what his punishment should be. And my issue personally in these specific situations is when a police officer, and don't get me wrong, I am very close to the police chief here in Phoenix, and I have family members who are sworn officers of the law. But if an officer is in a situation where they permanently harm or take the life of someone else, they are purposely circumventing the judiciary process, the due process that people are entitled to in this country, by going before a judge and a jury and facing their accuser and having to be distributed their consequences by a jury of their peers. When you kill somebody on the spot, you rob them of their process. And that's what I'm not okay with.
Yeah, basically, George Floyd was killed over trying to use a $20 bill,
Yes,
counterfeit $20 bill.
absolutely.
And, other people have been killed for selling single cigarettes.
Yes.
Uh, so that's where the discrepancies are. So, that's how we came to Black Lives Matter. What would make you treat a person like that? And if it's not everybody, it begs a question. Not all people are treated like that.
Absolutely.
And part of criminalizing those who have been kind of killed unjustly, that's part of a pattern. But I see that the media's changing. They don't do it as readily as they used to. Before, that was a go-to, to
Mm-hmm.
start talking about the person's background and all of that. But now they're a bit more mindful. They don't do that. So we are making progress. We just need to keep working at it, and thinking about those who went before us, who worked 40, 50 years on the same issues.
Yes.
And this area and others are like that. So
Absolutely.
keep the faith.
Yeah. Yeah. It's great to talk to you. Thank you so much.
You're
Dr.
welcome.
If you are still around, please jump in the comments and let me know if you have anything else to add. But again, Ms. Princess, thank you. It's good to see you again. Good to talk to you.
Good to see you too.
All right. Take care.
Okay, you too.
Love the comments. Please keep that conversation going. We're going to be on for about another 10 minutes or so. So keep the conversation going in the comments. And I agree. I love where the conversation is going. When it comes to things like this, you have to even understand the progression of our legal system. Some would even call it the evolution of our legal system. Currently, right now, this particular statement is not about color, but there are a disproportionate amount of people of color who are in our penal system right now as we speak for things that are no longer considered crimes in their own states. Many states, specifically to this subject, many states have legalized marijuana at the medicinal or recreational level across the country. There are many, many states that have done it, and there are thousands of people who are sitting in jail cells right now for doing something that is no longer a crime. And this is what we're talking about when we, and I love your comment about a step of the overall judiciary process. Yes, if you break the law, then someone who responsible for bringing you to justice will detain you, and then you start your judiciary process. But that is not skipping from I see you committing a crime to now I am court, judge, jury, and executioner all in one spot. And we can have the conversation about the Monday morning quarterbacking all day long. And I am not a police officer for that reason, because I admit that I do not have the wherewithal to make a decision like that to see whether or not I can choose self-preservation over someone else. However, there are people who have made a sworn oath to uphold this, and in some cases, they are doing an excellent job, and in many cases, we see room for improvement, and that's why we're having this discussion. If the money is going to other things, then we need to be more efficient as a country, as a state, as a county. This is not just the city cops. This is the sheriff's department. This is all the public safety officers. DPS is a part of it. DPS, they're not police officers. It's a completely different department. It's the Department of Public Safety. Just like Ms. Princess was saying in Portland, you had people who had no business being in that situation. Homeland Security is not responsible for the self-policing of peaceful protesters. Homeland Security and ICE had no business being in a situation trying to de-escalate a situation that was not escalated in Portland. This is just my own unpopular opinion. I completely agree with you. When you remove someone from a situation, you disable them permanently from their ability to defend themselves, which means that your Miranda rights have been violated. Point blank simple. If you have a right to an attorney and you are murdered at a crime scene by an officer, you have been absolved of your right to an attorney. The only thing that you have now is the right to remain silent. Everything else has now been stolen from you because you are now dead. And these are the conversations that people are having. I know I hit a sore spot when I was talking about making the comparison to corporal punishment and to police brutality. But again, I'm just reiterating conversations that are being had in the communities, not just outside communities. These ain't white folks that I'm talking about. I had a conversation with black people that were saying, what is the difference between my mama beating me with a switch and an officer beating me with a baton? And please understand, even though you don't share the opinion, these are conversations that are being had and probably need to be addressed, because if the person I was having that discussion with had that perspective, I guarantee you there are others who feel the same exact way. We have about 5 minutes. If you guys want to continue the discussion in the comments, thank you so much for your input. It was a great topic, great discussion. Love the conversation again in the comments. And we will continue to have this dialogue going forward, not just here in Arizona at the state level, but nationwide. And we will continue to pray for those who do pray. We will continue to come together, and we will continue to respect each other's opinions, even if we don't agree. We talked about that in several previous IG Live sessions, is just having the ability to have some civil discourse, to be able to stand with your fellow brother or your fellow sister and say, I don't agree with you, but that doesn't necessarily make you an idiot, doesn't make you stupid, doesn't make you a coward, doesn't make you corrupt or any other adjective that people like to use. One thing that Princess said that I really appreciated with respect to the media, I believe personally, again, my own personal opinion, that the reason why the media has backed away from criminalizing those who have been victimized of police brutality is because we are living in a society where nobody's private information is as safe as it used to be. And the very people who are in charge of reporting the news and criticizing people and mislabeling it as being just factual news reporting are coming under fire. You see it every day. It's not just on one side or one opinion from the news. As you've seen, Tucker Carlson and Sean Hannity on the right side of news reporting, who have pointed fingers and demonized people for many, many years, are now coming into fire. And I think the media is paying very close attention to how many lines they can cross, knowing that they have some skeletons in their closet. And the hypocrisy is real when you go out and you demonize people and you got a whole lot in your own background. Having said that, it looks like we can go ahead and wrap up this session. A couple of things for those who are local. Real quick, anybody in the Phoenix area in the Valley, Christ Church of the Valley is opening up their coffee houses at all 10 campuses from 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. all week long. And all beverages, all services, Wi-Fi, everything is free. Consider it basically a free Starbucks from 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. Staff is COVID safe. They will be wearing masks. Social distancing will be promoted. All of that. But if you just need to get away, if you are in a situation where you have to get out the house and do some work, you need a quiet space or something like that, please utilize that. You can go to ccv.church for all 10 of the campus locations. That is going on through the end of this current week. Love you, cousin. I hope to see you real soon. In the upcoming weeks, we're going to really change the entire focus, and we're going to kind of drill down into some things. So please stick around with us. In upcoming weeks, we're going to have some very special guests nationwide, and we're going to talk about how we can get to a more personal level of impact. So look for subjects like how to explore and expand your creativity in this COVID season, how to look for more ways to be more impactful. That's one thing that I've heard a lot from people as of lately, is that with everything going on between the racial tension, between the COVID, between this election process and stuff, is that people are reevaluating what they're doing with their life. And we're going to talk about that in upcoming weeks, about how you can be more impactful in the very season that we're in the seat that you're sitting in right now. So having said that, love you guys. Praying for everybody. Pray for each other. Continue to be great, and understand that you do not define your greatness by other people's acceptance of you. You will never know the impact that you have on other people. Just keep doing the Lord's work. God bless. Be safe. Love you guys. Take care.